Hi everyone, I'm Walnut and welcome to my VGC Regulation D tier list. Today I'm going to go over my initial thoughts and opinions on all the new Regulation D Pokemon and then I'll be ranking them. There'll be some bias to this and there's going to be a final shuffle of the rankings at the end, but if you want to follow along and rank the Pokemon with me, there'll be a link to the template in the description below. Alright, first up we're going to rank Charizard. Charizard gets solar power, so it gets a special attack boost in the sun at the cost of some HP every turn, but its special attack stat isn't that great. I think Chi-Yu actually does more damage in the sun, even though Charizard gets solar power, just because Chi-Yu is that OP. You do get a flying typing with Charizard, so you could use this next to like a Great Tusk if you were trying to do like a photosynthesis team, but I don't think this thing's actually too worth it, so I'm going to put Charizard down in the C tier. Next up is going to be Alolan Raichu. Gets some pretty nice utility moves in Fake Out, Encore, Nuzzle, but I'm pretty sure Raichu gets the same moves but actually has a useful ability because no one's really using Electric Terrain. If there was like a good way to set Electric Terrain like Miraidon was available, maybe you can use this guy. But otherwise, I don't think it's going to be all that useful. I'm going to leave Raichu down in the D tier. Next up is going to be Alolan Dugtrio. All three of its abilities seem pretty useless to me. Like, you can't really take hits, so I don't think you're like worried about the Sand Veil or Tangling Hair, and you're not really doing too much damage with a base 100 attack, so I feel like you just run like Iron Treads or something over this, and I'm gonna leave this down in the F tier. This is some dog water. Next up is Alolan Persian. This thing's pretty fast, not all that offensive or defensive, but it does get Fur Coat, so you can double your defense, take hits a little bit better that way. Not really worth it to run Technician when you only have base 60 attack and 75 special attack. But you do have some really good support moves like Fake Out, Taunt and Quash, and Foul Play as well if you actually want to do some damage with this guy. So I'm actually going to put Alolan Persian up in C tier. I think it's pretty usable on like the right team. Maybe not all that strong though. Arcanine has three good abilities in Intimidate, Flashfire, and Rockhead, but I think Intimidate's probably going to be the best one out of the three, just to reduce any physical attacks coming in. You are quad weak to water and ground, which is kind of unfortunate. I think normal Arcanine might be better if you're looking for an Intimidate Pokemon, but maybe if you're looking for like Rockhead, you can use like these moves to your advantage and deal tons of damage, especially since you can invest in the speed on this guy as well and get decently fast. But I don't know if it's going to be worth running this Pokemon. Could see some use. It's definitely got the power to back it up and the stats to back it up, so I'm going to put it in the B tier. Next up we have Galarian Slowbro. I don't think this Pokemon's all that great. The stats aren't that bad, but it's super slow and the abilities don't really work well with Trick Room. Because Quick Draw kind of ignores the Trick Room, Regenerator. You don't really want to be switching out and wasting your Trick Room turns like that, so I don't think it's going to be all that great. Shell's Sidearm is a very interesting move though. This is how I thought Terra Blast would work, like physical. It turns into a physical move if that would be stronger, but Terra Blast only does that after you Terastallize, which I think is a good change, or else it'd be a little bit too strong, I think. But otherwise, I don't think this Pokemon has too much going for it. You can set up Trick Room. I guess you can go for Belly Drums and maybe with a Quick Draw, just snipe some people with +6, I don't know, Shelled Sidearm. But I don't think this Pokemon's going to be all that great. I'm going to put Slowbro down in the D tier. Next up is going to be Alolan Muck. I actually faced one very recently, and they used Power of Alchemy on like a Perish Trap team to transfer the Gothitel's Shadow Tag over to Muck after it got knocked out, and then they started going for Minimize. The thing is I had Heavy Slam, so if you didn't know, Minimize just makes Heavy Slam 100% accurate and increases the damage. I don't think Alolan Muck is going to be too useful. Poison Touch isn't that great in VGC just because Poison takes a little while to go through and actually deal some damage. Gluttony, I don't know how useful this is going to be on Alolan Muck, so I'll probably throw this down in the D tier as well. Could see some use, especially with the Power of Alchemy. Next up we have Electrode with the Hisuian version. I'm pretty sure Aftermath is going to be its best ability. You could use Static, but it's like, this thing's taking one hit at most, realistically, and I don't think Soundproof is going to be all that useful, so probably Aftermath, get yourself low, deal some damage with like a Chloroblast, maybe a Thunderbolt, and then just get knocked out, deal some chip with the Aftermath. I think this thing's pretty bad though. I'm going to throw it down in the F tier. It's fast, but it's like you're just dying faster. Its attack stats aren't great. I kind of hate this thing. But the typing is interesting. Next up is going to be Tauros. I am very uninterested in this Pokemon. I'd much rather use one of the Paldean forms just because they look cooler and they're newer. But yeah, this thing doesn't really have much going for it in the way of stats. It's like decently fast, but like, what are you hitting with this base 100 attack? This is the like Dugtrio level offense. But at least you get Intimidate, so you'll at least be D tier. Maybe even C tier, but maybe no. Next up is going to be Articuno, and I know a lot of people clown on Articuno for being like the worst bird. Ice flying is not the greatest typing, but I thought it wouldn't be that bad, and it actually won like a tournament recently. It has like decent stats, so if you take advantage of the new like snow buffs and the ice type buffs, you can get a lot more defense in the snow. Maybe you set up an Aurora Veil as well. And after that, you can start going for like 100% accurate blizzards and roost, since you're probably not taking too much damage, especially since they can't even hit you too well since you have a snow cloak. And then you can also just freeze dry if they resist it and they bring in like a water type or something. Yeah, I think Articuno actually has some potential, even though it's been kind of clowned on in the past. I think it's at least C. I'm willing to put it into B tier. Next up is going to be Galarian Articuno. This guy's pretty cool because they get competitive to boost their special attack anytime their stats get dropped. I don't really know how you would use this thing because it's decently fast. I looked on Peakalytics back in like Series 10, the non-Dynamax format. They were using like a Trick Room slow Galarian Articuno, which I thought was kind of unusual. I don't think this thing's got too many tools going for it besides the nice ability, okay-ish stat spread. I'd probably put this in like C tier, maybe B tier. I guess we'll put it in B tier because you got a cool mask. Next up is going to be Zapdos. I've definitely seen a lot of Zapdos in the format already. It's got access to static, very nice ability to potentially paralyze your Pokemon. And on like rain teams, you can go for fully accurate thunders and hurricanes. On like non-rain teams, maybe you can go for like heat waves, maybe Thunderbolt 2. Yeah, pretty solid Pokemon all around. This thing's definitely going to be an A tier at least. Then we have the Galarian Zapdos. This guy's kind of funky. At least he gets Defiant, which is a nice ability. Okay, like pretty standard moves, good stats. Also gets access to Quick Guard, which is pretty unique, but I don't think this thing's got anything too special going for it. I think this thing's pretty solidly just B tier, good Pokemon. Next up, we have Cantonian Moltres, and Cantonian Moltres has access to Flame Body, which is a pretty good move if you get attacked by like, maybe you bait in like Urshifu Surging Strikes and you go for like a defensive Terra, maybe even like a Rocky Helmet on this guy and just become like a physical attacker's worst nightmare. Moltres might be pretty good, but I don't think its stats are too amazing. I guess you could use this to set Tailwind, but I don't think Moltres is going to be that spectacular. But the Flame Body is nice. I don't think it's like that bad, but I'll put it in C tier for now. Mostly because Galarian Moltres is way cooler. It gets access to Berserk to boost its special attack anytime its HP drops below 50%, and you can get multiple Berserk boosts in a single battle by just like restoring your HP, whether that be through like Citrus Berry, Pollen Puff, or like Lunar Blessing. Yeah, you can use this like set up Nasty Plot, get even more boost from the Berserk, and then deal some pretty good damage with Fiery Wrath. The damage isn't all that amazing because you only have a 100 base special attack, but your bulk is pretty good, your speed's not awful. I really like the design of this Pokemon as well. It's just like not crazy overwhelming, even with boosts, so I'm going to leave it in the B tier. Next up is going to be Typhlosion. They made something way cooler than it, and it's a little bit faster than the Hisuian version, a little bit weaker as well. But I would just stick with the Hisuian version because it actually has some useful abilities instead of Blaze and Flash Fire. So I'm going to leave this guy down in the C tier with his flying brother. But yeah, now we got Cool Daniel. This thing's probably going to go to the B tier. It gets access to Eruption. You can go for Heat Wave as well if you are low on HP. And Frisk is going to be like pretty useful in close team sheets if you want to, I guess, find out their items for sure. Of course, you can always just guess or just figure it out. But you could also run Blaze if you like want to bait like a Sucker Punch, go for a Terra Fire, and then after that, like a Chen Pao Sucker Punch will bring you into just about like the Blaze range, depends on the roll, and then you'll have a really powerful Heat Wave, which is nice. Yeah, I'm probably going to be running this guy with a Choice Scarf Eruption, just do a ton of damage with that, so yeah. Typhlosion Hisui inversion is going in the B tier. Next up we have Quagsire. It has access to Unaware and Water Absorb, but I think you're probably going to stick with Unaware. Maybe you just use this Pokemon for like Haze, Yawn, but I don't think it's all that useful because it's just kind of sits there, doesn't really have too much offense. Defenses are okay, and it's just really slow. But it gets some stuff like Haze and Yawn, so I'm going to put it in D. As much as I don't want to put it in F, I think it's an F tier Pokemon. Next up is going to be Galarian Slowking. You get Eerie Spell as a signature move to remove PP. I don't think that's going to be all that useful since the games go pretty fast. But if you can catch this on like a move with 5 PP, maybe they didn't PP up, you can just stop your opponent from attacking, which is kind of funny. Trick Room is pretty interesting on this Pokemon, but I think the most interesting move is going to be a skill swap with the Curious Medicine. And you can use this to just like wipe your opponent's stats. You do wipe your own stats as well when you switch in, but as long as you're not like a boosting team, this should be fine. I think this thing could see some use in some like niche situations, but there's like better Trick Room setters, so I'd probably leave this down in C, but a little bit better than the other guy. Next up, I put Quillfish on here just because it was on the template. I didn't make the template, but yeah, Quillfish, Intimidate Pokemon, gets Barbarage. I don't think it's all that useful. It's just gonna sit there after the Intimidate. Maybe use this with a Destiny Bond, but I'll put it in the D tier next to Tauros. Nope, you know what? This is going in the F tier. It looked at me funny. I don't like its lips. Next up is gonna be Uxie. Uxie's kind of like Cresselia, very defensive, levitating psychic type, but this guy actually gets access to Imprison, so you could use this as a way to stop the Trick Room from going up. But after the Trick Room is stopped, I don't really know what you're doing. Your offense stats aren't very good. Maybe you have some more utility, but like maybe you get the Thunder Wave off, but Cresselia could get the Thunder Wave off. You could just reverse the Trick Room instead. And maybe you can... And Cresselia also gets access to the Lunar Blessing, which is really nice, so I don't think Uxie's all that great. I'm going to leave this down in the C tier. Next up is going to be Mesprit. Mesprit, Hazelf, and Uxie are all kind of the same for the most part. I guess Mesprit might get some interesting coverage moves, it looks like. Does everyone get these moves? I don't think they all have the same moves. But I don't think Mesprit's stat spread is anything too special. It's kind of like a jack of all trades, and I think that's not very good on this Pokemon. You don't really excel in anything. So I'm gonna just leave it in a very average C tier. But Azelf, Azelf on the other hand, you have a ton of offenses, not a lot of defenses, but this thing is the most powerful explosion in the game, and that's probably what Azelf is going to be doing most of the time. It could also run some other set and maybe bait the explosion. But yeah, I think Azelf is pretty cool, not all that powerful even though I really like it, so I'm going to also put in the C tier. Last Pokemon in this box is going to be Heatran. You get Flash Fire, making this one of the best grass types in the format. And then you also have Heat Wave, Earth Power, Terra Blast, Flash Cannon as moves you can go for. This thing, I feel like it typically runs like leftovers or something and just sits around, does a ton of damage, and is good. And is a good Pokemon overall. Has good stats, nice ability. This thing's probably S tier Pokemon, at least A tier. Yeah, we're gonna give it the S. But Heatran's not going to be lonely for too long because next up is Cresselia. Cresselia is a super bulky, has some amazing moves, especially Lunar Blessing, which will heal your ally and also cure them of any status conditions that are not volatile, so no confusion. But like burns, paras, poisons, all those can get healed up. It also has access to a Trick Room, Thunder Wave, Ally Switch. You can also invest offensively into this thing if you want, maybe go for Calm Mind. But yeah, this Pokemon is absolutely amazing. Levitate is great. I'm going to put this up in the S tier, especially since I love this Pokemon. I actually hunted for the shiny, though I probably won't be using it in comp. But yeah, Cresselia, S tier. Next up is Samurott. I don't know why you're using this Pokemon. Hisuian version exists. This one is a little bit slower, a little bit bulkier, special, but I don't think that's worth running, because then you get the sharpness ability on the Hisuian version. You're going to be doing more damage. You get access to the new move Ceaseless Edge, which will set up spikes, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I would just run this version over this one. So Samurott, we're going to put in D tier, and Hisuian, I think I'll throw in S for now. I haven't really seen too much of this yet. I think it has a lot of potential though, and I'm excited to see what people can do with the Hisuian Samurott. Next up is going to be the Hisuian Lilligant. This Pokemon is scary, honestly. Chlorophyll next to like Torkoal. This thing can go for after use, but also just threaten a ton of damage with its own like solar blades. This thing does more damage, or has more base power than a solar beam. You can also go for Encore if you want, close combat. This thing's also like sleep powders. This thing's just very scary. It also looks pretty cool, gruesome legs. And now it can not only walk, but run. We're gonna put this up in... I actually want to give it the A tier. I think this thing's a threat. Actually, I'm gonna bump it down to the B tier, but I think it has A tier potential. This thing is very scary. Next up we have Hisuian Zoroark. So this Pokemon has a very unique typing, making it completely immune to Annihilate. I thought this Pokemon would just be kind of like a sixth Pokemon you add on if you were hard countered by Annihilate, and I think it'd be pretty funny to just throw onto a team, make people just second guess themselves if you have like 5 Pokemon you really like. But otherwise, maybe you could turn into something threatening, set up a sub in front of your opponents, but I mean they do have 2 Pokemon, so if they go for a normal attack or a spread move, you're just kind of boned. So I don't think Hisuian Zoroark's all that great. I'd probably leave it down in the D tier, honestly. Though I hope it sees some use because it has a really cool design. Actually, based on design alone and ability, C tier. C tier, C for Copium. Next up is Hisuian Braviary, who has some decent abilities, Sheer Force and Tinted Lens to deal a little more damage, but I don't know how this Pokemon actually works because it's not very fast. But Esper Wing will make it faster, but since it's not that fast, maybe you want to run into Trick Room. Yeah, this thing is just kind of awkward, but the shiny is absolutely fire, so it's gonna be in D tier. Actually, design alone is enough to bump it up to C tier. Next up is gonna be Tornadus, probably one of the premier Tailwind setters of Regulation D. You are not a Dark type, so you can get pranked by other pranksters. But this Pokemon's pretty fast, so you can just get the priority moves off first. Tailwind is great. You can also use Rain Dance to set it up for other Pokemon or set it up for yourself to get 100% accurate Bleak Wind Storms. You also get access to Taunt to stop other people. All around a very solid Pokemon. You can run several items on this, like Covert Cloak, Mental Herb, stuff like that. This thing's at least A tier, maybe S, we're gonna see. The chicken form though, I think this thing seems like it's pretty bad. It's a little bit faster, so you could use this as a Tailwind setter. I just think the other Tornadus would be better. Like maybe you go for Tailwind and U-turn and take advantage of the Regenerator, but I don't think this thing's gonna be all that great. I'm probably gonna be putting this down in the C tier, even though I don't think it's as bad as some of the other C tier Pokemon. Next up is going to be Thundurus, Tornadus' electric brother, and they're going to do some similar things, like they can both set up Prankster Tailwinds, but Thundurus gets access to some pretty unique moves like Eerie Impulse and Thunder Wave. Prankster Thunder Waves are really annoying to deal with, and also Eerie Impulse can be used on like your Contrary Unamorous and increase their special attack, or just drop your opponent's special attack. Pretty versatile move. I think Thundurus is at least as good as Tornadus. And we're going to put them both in the A tier for now. As for the Therian version, this one's got a lot more special attack, decent speed. It's probably going to be more offensive than supportive like the Incarnate version. I don't think this thing's going to be all that amazing. Abilities Volt Absorb, but I don't know how many electric attacks you're taking unless you're facing a ton of already electric keys going for electric moves into you. But yeah, even then, it's like you're not super bulky, so how many hits can you even take? I think this thing's probably like a solid attacker, probably like a B or C tier. We're gonna put it in B tier. Next up is going to be the Sheer Force Landorus. I don't think anyone's really running Sand Force, so we're just going to ignore that. Sheer Force is great because it'll just boost any moves with secondary effects, and it actually will ignore the Life Orb recoil. So Life Orb is pretty good on Sheer Force Landorus. You can go for some moves like Earth Power, Sludge Bomb, Sand Seer Storm. That's a tongue twister. But yeah, pretty good stats, pretty good offenses. I think this is going to be a pretty solid attacker. I'm going to do a ton of damage. So yeah, we're just gonna put in the B tier. We're gonna put in the A tier. This thing's probably a better attacker than this guy. Next up is gonna be the Therian Landorus. This one gets access to Intimidate instead and a ton of attack. This thing's probably gonna be able to just cycle the Intimidates with U-turn, maybe get some speed control with Rock Tomb, and still do a ton of damage either way. I think this Pokemon's gonna be great. I'm gonna also put this in the A tier. Maybe up to S. But I can tell you right now, this Delphox is not going to be an S tier Pokemon. It's not anything special to me, sorry if it's your favorite Pokemon, but it's just got like decent special attack, decent speed, like pretty average moves, you know, like Heat Wave, Psychic. We're just going to put this in the C tier. Chestnut on the other hand, I don't see why anyone's using this Pokemon. It's another grass and fighting type. Ability is bulletproof, but I don't think that's too useful. Maybe use this with like Iron Defense, Body Press, but you could get crit. You could just get hit by special moves like a fire move, a fairy move. This thing might get forced to Terra pretty easily. So I'm gonna put this down in the D tier. Greninja's actually one of like my favorite Pokemon. It looks super cool. I don't actually know if Battle Bond is legal. Okay, next up is Greninja, and I actually just had to look it up. I think Battle Bond is legal if you already have that Greninja. I don't, so I'm not going to be able to use that. But I think Protean is a super cool ability. Too bad it got nerfed or changed, however you want to think of it. I think with a Battle Bond, maybe you can use it with like Loaded Dice, Water Shuriken, and maybe pick up some KOs that way. I don't know how great that would be. But yeah, I don't think this Pokemon's all that amazing. Pretty fast. The special attack stats aren't even that high. Pretty frail as well. Maybe you can do something with like specs, but I think this thing is probably a solid D tier, but because it's cool, we're bumping it up to C. Next up is going to be Avalugg. This thing's kind of built like a table. A ton of defense. Not much special defense though, so it kind of just collapses if you hit it with a special move. Do get some interesting moves like Wide Guard, Heavy Slam, Body Press. Maybe if you're able to eliminate a special attacker, you can bring this in and wall some stuff, but I don't think it's going to be that great. It has two like 4 times weaknesses, Steel and Fighting. Those are both pretty common, so I'm going to put this down in like D tier, but I think it could hit F, even though its stats are pretty nice in some aspects. But if you want to see a Pokemon that does defenses right, let's look at Hisuian Goodra, who has 150 base special defense, 100 base defense, and the ability Shell Armor, so you can't get crit. So if you set up some acid armors on this guy's gonna just sit around. It's gonna be very difficult to remove. And you can also go for Life Deuce to help support your partner slot, Body Press if you want some offense, and Heavy Slam to just hit some fairies, I guess. You could also run Sap Sipper, but I think if you're running an acid armor set, you definitely want to run Shell Armor instead. Yeah, pretty cool Pokemon. I think Hisuian Goodra is probably like an A tier Pokemon, maybe B. But I'm willing to bump it up to A. At least it's so cute. Look at this thing. Little slug. Look at the shell. Look at the little... I love base Goodra too, but man, the Hisuian one's just sick. Next one's going to be Carbink. I don't know what you're doing with this guy. It has a ton of defenses, like 0 offenses. I don't think it has very useful moves either. Like, you're going to be sitting there, but you're not going to be doing anything. So I think this Pokemon's pretty useless. I'm going to drop it down in the F tier. Maybe it has some use. You can prove me wrong. Next up is going to be Decidueye. It has access to Long Reach and Overgrow, but I don't think these abilities are all that great. Attacks aren't that amazing either. Spirit Shackle, Leaf Blade, Shadow Sneak is stabs and stuff. Stats aren't amazing, like only 107 base attack. Special attack is pretty high for some reason as well. Speed is low. I don't think this thing is going to see too much use. It's going to get destroyed by Chin Pao. It's going in the D tier for me. Next up is going to be the Hisuian Decidueye. I think Triple Arrows is a super cool move, and I think Hisuian Decidueye has a nice design. It also has Scrappy as its ability, which is really nice, going to help you with that fighting typing a little bit better. You can go for fighting moves into ghost types. Thing is it's pretty slow though, so you're not going to be able to take advantage of the triple arrows as much, like the flinch chance and stuff. So maybe you run this with some speed, maybe like on a Trick Room team. I don't know. I don't think this Pokemon would be that great with like Trick Room or anything. I don't think it hits hard enough to make it worth it, but it's got a cool move. I hope it sees some use. So for that, we're going to put it in the C tier. Next up is going to be Berserker. I don't think this Pokemon is very good. Its stats aren't very impressive. You could just run Iron Treads and just have better stats. The ability is pretty interesting, but you know, all the Treasure of Ruin abilities kind of act like that. But for any type move, it does get access to Fake Out, but I don't think this thing is very good. I'm going to drop it down in the F tier, sorry. On the other side of the spectrum, we have Rillaboom, who's one of the best Pokemon in the format currently. You have access to Fake Out, U-Turn, Woodhammer, Knockoff, moves like that. This thing's an absolute beast. You can sit in front of like a ton of moves. You have Grassy Surge to help support your team. You can heal them up that way. You do not have Grassy Glide, but I mean, I don't think you need it. This Pokemon is definitely like S tier. I also used it recently, so I have a little bit of additional bias towards Rillaboom, but I'm just kind of glad that it's doing so well in this format. When it comes to Inteleon, I don't think I'm going to be using this guy. If I'm looking for a water-type crit Pokemon, there's another guy who's coming on this list. But yeah, this guy's pretty fast, got some special attack, but very frail, single target attacks, like you get 1 KO. You can maybe get a KO if it crits, but I don't think this Pokemon's worth running. I'm going to put it down in the D tier. Next up is Cinderace. This Pokemon is the only like Libero Protean user that is monotype, or at least the final evolution is monotype. So you can go for Pyro Ball and you can still go for like Sucker Punch on turn 2 and turn into a dark type, whereas if Meowscarada went for Flower Trick on turn 1, it would turn into a pure grass type. So that Cinderace has that going for it at least. I don't know how good it's gonna be. I mean, it has some access to some pretty good moves. It's pretty fast. I think this thing could see some use. Cinderace is going in the C tier. Last box of Pokemon now. First up is Glastrier, and I recently found out these guys do not have their signature moves anymore. Spectre and Glastrier do not have Astral Barrage and Glacial Lance, so that's kind of lame. But you do still have tons of stats on this guy. Could everything except for like speed. But you're probably going to be using this in Trick Room if you're using it. And if you are, I think this is a pretty solid Trick Room Pokemon. I'm going to put it in A tier, even though I haven't seen too much of it. I would expect this Pokemon to be quite good though, just based on the stats alone. You could even run like a weakness policy on this thing and just blow something up after taking a super effective hit, because this thing definitely has the stats to take a hit. Next up is going to be Spectrier. It's like, I want to call this OG Fluttermane because it's a fast special attacking ghost type, even though I never really played Sword and Shield competitively. But I'm kind of disappointed it doesn't have Astral Barrage anymore. I would love a spread ghost move that does a ton of damage, especially off this base 145 special attack. I mean, at least you have some other utility moves like Snarl. I don't know about running Will-O-Wisp, but I saw that on Pikalytics. I'm not especially excited to use Spectrier. I'm going to leave this in the B tier, just because I probably run Fluttermane instead. Next up is Regieleki, and I've heard a lot of things about this Pokemon in the past, just being super annoying or oppressive because of how fast it is, and yeah, I didn't realize how fast this thing is. Like, you have to be at 186 speed with a choice scarf to outspeed this thing, or 139 with Tailwind. This thing is ridiculously fast, and you can just go for Electro Web to slow things down as well, Electro Ball to do extra damage to slow Pokemon. Regieleki is an absolute monster, and I'm probably going to just throw it in A tier for now. I haven't seen too much of it from the teams I'm facing at least, but I think this thing is easily S tier. Actually, yeah, it gets Terra Blast now. If it can Terra type, it doesn't have to be locked into electric moves only, really. Next Pokemon up is going to be Regidrago. Regidrago didn't get its ability nerfed like Regieleki did. It still has the 1.5 times boost, so high HP Dragon Energies with like Tailwind or Scarf or something are going to be pretty threatening, but of course you can just bring in a Fairy type Pokemon, and there is Fluttermane in the format, you know, that one guy. So yeah, I don't know if Regidrago is going to be all that amazing, but I don't think it's going to be bad for just like solid damage. It's going to be at least like Typhlosion level, you know, just click the move. Next up is going to be Weirdeer. This guy's just Big Stantler. It's evolved now, so it can hold an item instead of the Violet Stantler if you want to use this guy. You do have the Psychic typing now, so you're not weak to fighting, but you are like weak to Dark and Bug and stuff. So I guess you could use Weirdeer or Stantler. I feel like they're probably pretty interchangeable, just occupying slightly different niches. Yeah, I'm gonna throw this guy in the C tier. I think it's definitely usable. Kleavor is going to be the next Pokemon, and its signature move is Stone Axe, which will set Stealth Rocks on the target's side when it gets hit. My problem with it is that it's only 90% accurate, so it kind of feels bad when you miss. But this thing does a ton of damage with Sharpness and like Stone Axe, X-Scissor. And it's also not even that slow, even though it looks really slow. Like, how does it have base 85 speed with those giant stone axes? It doesn't make sense. Yeah, this guy looks pretty cool. He seems pretty fun to play. I'm ready to set up Stealth Rocks. He's going in the A tier. Next up is going to be Sneasler. Sneasler has access to the ability Unburden, which can proc in a lot of different ways. I've seen Mirror Herb with like Swagger. I've seen Seed plus Terrain. I've seen Fake Out plus Normal Gem. I think you can also just do it with Focus Sash if you choose to run that. Yeah, a lot of different ways to run Sneasler. After you get rid of your item and proc the Unburden, you can also go for Acrobatics or just attack things with Dire Claw. I think this Pokemon's going to be pretty strong, and I'm willing to also put it in the A tier. I used to think it was really goofy, but it grew on me for sure. I think the design's actually not that bad. Next up is going to be Enamorus. Enamorus has the ability Contrary or Q-Charm. Contrary is going to be really nice with superpower, so you can boost your attack and your defense stages while also doing damage. If you don't want to go physical, you could also just run like Dazzling Gleam, Springtide Storm, Mystical Fire, Earth Power, moves like that. You have 135 special attack, so definitely going to be hitting hard with that, and you're also pretty fast as well. My problem with Enamorus is that I think it looks kind of dumb. I think the Genies have some pretty cool designs, but I just don't like Enamorus. But I think it's a good Pokemon, so it's going in, yeah, it's going in the A tier. The next Pokemon is going to be Enamorus Therian, whose design I like a little bit more than the Incarnate version, but I just don't like how inaccessible this Pokemon is. It's only available in Legends Arceus, like after you beat the game, and if you're looking for a Trick Room version of this Pokemon, which ideally would probably have low attack, low speed, that's going to be nearly impossible to reset for because of the way Legends Arceus IVs work. A 0 on Legends Arceus IV is going to be equal to a 0 to 19 IV in like normal games, so you're going to have an awful time resetting for this if you want like a perfect Trick Room Enamorus Therian, so I wouldn't really bother unless they come out with a way to reverse cap your Pokemon. But yeah, this Pokemon still isn't that bad though. I would expect it to be at least A or B tier, but because of how inaccessible the Trick Room version is, I'm going to put it in the B tier. Next up is going to be Overquill. This Pokemon's faster, bigger, puffier than the Quillfish, but I still don't think it's all that great. They're just about the same. I'm going to put this slightly above though. I think you could see some use because it's pretty fat. It's got a little bit more speed now, so I think you can actually keep up with some Pokemon, maybe even attack first. And maybe you can even like get off a Destiny Bond before you go down, which I think would be interesting. Next up is going to be Basculegions. So the male one is going to be better in physical attack, the female one is going to be more special attack focused, but I think the physical attack one is going to be better just because of the way the moves work, like the moves they have access to, and also the signature move, Lost Respects, being physical. And this thing actually does so much damage, even with like 2 KO'd allies. You're doing 150 base power, maybe boosted by adaptability, could be even boosted by Terra. So this Pokemon is an absolute threat. You can also just run this in Rain with Swift Swim and maybe do a ton of damage with your Wave Crash. Yeah, Basculegion, I'm going to be putting this up in... I want to put this in A tier, honestly. But I think it's probably... Yeah, I'm going to be putting this Pokemon in the A tier. As for the female version, I'll give it a generous B tier just because it has some nice colors as well. Last but not least, we have the 3 little bears. Let's start off with Ursaluna. This thing gets Facade, Earthquake, Headlong Rush. You can go for Shadow Claw or Crunch as your coverage move. But yeah, this thing is certainly threatening, especially with Guts and a base 140 attack. And I mean, its other stats are great too, except for its speed. But you could run this thing in Trick Room, especially since Cresselia is so good. And Cresselia also has Levitate, so you can Earthquake next to it. I think one of my problems with Ursaluna is that Rillaboom's going to be popular, so Grassy Surge is going to stop your Earthquakes from doing as much damage, and the other bears, Urshifu Rapid Strike, Urshifu Single Strike, are also going to be very threatening for Ursaluna. So I think Ursaluna is very good and a big threat, but I think I'm just going to leave it in A tier for now. The Urshifus have a very good ability, being Unseen Fist, allowing them to hit through Protects, which is probably the most popular move in VGC. You also have access to like close combat, priority moves like Aqua Jet, Sucker Punch, and Wicked Blow or Surging Strikes, which will always critically hit, allowing you to hit through boosts and also ignore like Intimidate. You can burn these Pokemon and the Intimidate won't be ignored by the burn, but of course that means you have to actually be able to burn these Pokemon, and these guys are going to be hitting you very hard in return. This guy's a little bit vulnerable to the Rocky Helmets because Surging Strike hits 3 times, but otherwise these Pokemon are very powerful. I would expect these guys to be S tiers for sure. Alright, now that we've gone through all the Pokemon, let's do our final shuffle of the rankings. I think firstly I need to bump Quillfish or Overquill up at least 1 each. These guys really aren't that bad. I think Overquill could even be B tier, but I'm not confident enough to put it up there. I think I'm also going to move Basculegion down to like C tier, just because this one exists. Let's see, who else? This Tornadus, I don't think it's actually that bad, but I'm going to keep it here because it's that ugly. I know I said this Thundurus was like B or C tier. It's definitely not C tier based on its like special attack stat being that good. I feel like it's got to be at least B tier. Let's see, Hisuian Lilligant. High key, low key. This thing I think will win a regional or some sort of large tournament. I'm pretty confident in this Pokemon being pretty strong, or like secretly pretty strong. Let's see. I'm also gonna move Galarian Articuno down, just this one in particular. I feel like the other birds are gonna be better. I don't know. Maybe it's just the typing. I just don't feel too confident in this Pokemon. Lastly, I'm going to be bringing a Lucky down to the A tier. I don't think it's that special that it needs to be an S, so I think I'm just going to drop it down to A with Terra and stuff, and without Dynamax, maybe a Lucky won't be as good anymore. We'll see, but this is going to be my final ranking. I know it's not perfect, but I'm pretty happy with this list. And if you haven't figured it out, these Pokemon aren't really ranked within the tiers, but these are just my initial impressions of all the Regulation D Pokemon. Let me know if you think I overestimated or underestimated any of these Pokemon in the comments below. Like and sub if you enjoyed the video, and until next time, bye bye!